Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. Those of you who are logging in to get started with our session today, Dispelling the Myth of the Sassy Black Girl. We are very excited about this presentation, and we're going to allow folks to get settled in and just click in so that we're all here, we're all present, we're all ready, and so on. It's a wonderful Tuesday. Here in New Orleans, we just had a huge storm last night, so I'm hoping that there won't be any technical difficulties today. So please bear with us as we seek to bring you a very, very important topic today. Of course, we want folks as they come in to do a little shout out for us and let us know where you're hailing from this morning. We had quite a few people to sign in from all over the world. We've got folks who are signing in from the Caribbean, from the UK. And so we're really excited that you're here. So it's evening for the folks in the UK. So thank you so much for that. I always check to see who is clicking in. And I've been really impressed by the nonprofits that are clicking in. Those of you who are out there doing all kinds of amazing work. So I do take a look at who's registering, and I actually go to your websites and I take a look and see who are you coming in, because we're more than as a service of providing this training for you to decolonize your minds and to strengthen your competence in working with Black children and their families. We are a community, and so we're here. We've told you who we are, and we want to know who are you. So we thank you so much for the work that you do every single day in all these different roles and so on. So I'm really glad to see you. It's great to see the folks over on the West Coast getting up early to spend their morning with us, and definitely those folks who are coming on the other side of the pond, what we call the Atlantic there, that to see that they're staying up to be with us during this time. So we really appreciate it. Something else that we haven't done before that I thought about, I think about a lot of things as my head hits that pillow at night. And I was thinking it would be important for us to be able to start our sessions by giving praise to the ancestors. And so we want to give praise to those who've come before us, regardless of your ethnic background, regardless of your identities. I think we all stand on the shoulders of those who have been very committed to this work before us. And so we want to give honor to our ancestors and to our living elders as well, because they certainly guide me as I do this work. And so we give praise to them. We lift them up today and be able to do that. So I was feeling that. I hadn't talked to the staff before this, but I think we might even start doing libations because this is such important work for you to be here. I see that we have some folks who were attendees at the ESEA conference. Thank you so much for following us. We want to shout back, give you a clap back. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this. Also, thanks to all of you who are starting to partner with us and are contacting us to begin the collaboration and the partnership. So we thank you very much for that. I see some people are having technical difficulties, so I'm going to ask that our staff try to assist them with if they're having audio difficulties and things like that, to see if we can help to whatever extent that we can during this time. So again, to everyone, as you come in, as you log in, please, do a welcome, a shout out from wherever you're hailing this morning, because we'd like to know where's everybody coming from. So we would appreciate that as you sign in and log in, that you give a shout out for your organization or even the town, the village, the state that you're in. So we want to start. I'm going to share my screen and let's see what we can do to get started here. And just remind you of who we are. And of course, we're coming to you with the co-founders, Dr. Constance West and myself, right? You've seen us many times before. We are here. Let me share my screen. Maybe. So you can just take a look. There we go. And we have our bios, but you can go on our website and see our bios. We're not going to take up that time here to be able to do that. And then we also have our staff here as well. So we have our graduate research assistants. We have Ashley Pettion and Jacqueline Marshall. They both are serving as our graduate assistants, and they're here. We also have two staff members who cannot join us, and they are our social media and graphic design artists. And they're doing a lot of the background work, so you often don't see them. And let's see. So let's move on to the updates. So we have a lot going on. Finally, you can now register for the CRESTS-Achieve Credentialing Program. So if you're interested in going through the full training, 17 units for educators and parents, and an additional 5 units for mental health professionals to make it 22 units. You can now register, pre-register for that, and we'll get that started very shortly. Now, what's interesting about that is that you then fully come into our community so that you can begin to engage with us. I would suggest that anytime you register for any of these training programs like African-centered counseling, that's a 3-part training program that you come into the community. So you know how we've been sharing resources in the chat with our previous webinars. We're going to give you an opportunity to do some peer-to-peer learning so that you all can share ideas of what you've been using, what works within your setting, and then also we can continue to share with you. Of course, our Uplift newsletter is coming out next month. And I'm sorry, this month, right? So it's coming out very soon. And although you got a chance to see Dr. Jimmy Caldwell last month, he's very dynamic. His concept paper is now up on the website. You can download it. I think you all were impressed by all 3 of those scholars last month, and now all of their papers are available for download on the website. And you know, we just want to say we had such a wonderful time at the ESEA conference that was held here in New Orleans. It was amazing. We met so many people who are doing good work themselves. And of course, we're interested in collaborating with them. And of course, we always have more webinars for you. Next month, we will have a webinar on parenting, on Afrocentric parenting. And so we'll be able to do that. Dr. West?
Yes, so here's a review of what we've been doing this term. We started off in January with our Ask Me Anything session on Facebook. Last month, as Dr. West-Olatunji has just mentioned, we had a fantastic panel discussion, which you can access on our YouTube channel. And you can also go to our website and go to the recent events. You go to the events page, and all recent events or past events, you can access the videos. Again, last month was really amazing, and we got a chance to hear from all of our authors of our concept papers. Of course, this month, today, you are all here for our discussion about dispelling the myth of the sassy Black girl, and we'll get to that in a little. Next month, of course, Dr. West-Olatunji has already talked to you about our focus will be on parenting, and we will give you 5 key Afrocentric parenting skills that are correlated with high education, high academic achievement in Black children in particular. And then in May, in honor of Mother's Day and a National Mental Health Awareness Month, we will have a webinar on addressing the mental health needs of Black mothers. And the focus there is thinking about Black women as being strong, but even the strong get weary at times, and it's okay to reach out and ask for help. So we hope that you'll join us and you'll spread the word about what we're doing next month and in May. And we hope to have you there.
Thank you. So our guest today, our guest panelist is Dr. Ebony White. She's a licensed professional counselor, a national certified counselor, and an approved clinical supervisor. She's an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Counseling and Family Therapy, as well as program director of the Masters in Addictions Counseling Program at Drexel University in Philadelphia, PA. She also serves as mental health counseling and training. She also provides, mental health counseling and training through the Center for Marcus in Trenton, New Jersey, and in the Reframing Outcomes through Afrocentric Research ROAR lab. She focuses on advocacy and social justice within the African American community. Dr. White has received several awards, a Community Service Award from the New Jersey State Federation of Colored Women's Clubs and the Carver Youth and Family Center in 2018. In 2021, she was awarded the Dr. Judy Lewis Council for Social Justice Award from the American Counseling Association. She is president-elect of the Council for Social Justice, and she is immediate past chair of the North Atlantic region of ACA, and was recently appointed to ACA's Anti-Racism Commission in 2021. But most importantly, she says, she is a patient daughter, a bratty sister, a loyal friend, a bomb godmother, a favorite cousin, and the favorite granddaughter. You know, we want to know about that. And additionally, she hosts the Ebb the Celeb podcast. So we welcome her to our panel today. Good afternoon, Dr. White.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm wonderful. We're glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here, hailing from Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely, Philly. All right, so let's get into this. So our learning objectives today, there are 3, and I believe Dr. West is going to go over those.
Okay, so as participants in this webinar, we hope that you increase your knowledge about the ecosystemic factors that influence Black girls' socio-emotional well-being and academic performance. We also want you to become more aware or augment your awareness of how cultural hegemony in education and mental health training programs can limit professionals' abilities to counter race-based stress amongst Black children, Black youth, especially girls. And last, we want you to expand your understanding of the use of culture-centered, gender-centric interventions for Black girls in particular.
All right, that's a tall order, but we're going to try to do it. So we're going to start you off because, like I said, we're a community. So this is not just we're a bunch of experts and we're just going to talk at you. We want engagement. So we're going to start you off with creating a word cloud. So we have a question for you. So you need to, if you are on a computer, you need to use the first information. If you are using your smartphone, you need to type in the number 22333 and then text virtually almost my name, CIRECIEOLATU, and then 087. Okay. And that lets you join. And then you can answer this question: what behaviors come to mind when you think about Black girls exhibiting sassiness? All right, so I want to see those responses. You can use your computer, as I said, just go to that link, or with your phone, go to 22333, and then in the text area, type in CRESTIEOLATU, and then the number 087. So let's see, what do we have here? I'm waiting for, ooh, look at that, spunk, swag, style, attitude. Okay, let's see. So as you know, with the word cloud, we know that the font size tells us the frequency of how many people have typed in that particular word. So the larger the font, the more people actually type that word in. So we get to see what some of your thoughts are in terms of the behaviors that come to your mind when you're thinking about Black girls exhibiting sassiness. So as I told you, I do take a look at who is registering for these sessions. So I know a lot of you are working with young Black girls, right? So I know that you've experienced the ways in which they uniquely interact with each other and also with adults. And so you've had a chance to see some of the ways in which Black girls are responding or navigating their environment, right? So I'm taking a look. Dr. West, any thoughts come to mind when you're looking at that? Dr. White, Ashley? I see strong becoming really important.
Attitude.
I see attitude, which is something that I hear a lot.
Yep.
So it's standing out to me.
Right.
Yeah, look
bravery.
at that. Spirited.
Showing courage.
Black girl magic. I love that one. Confidence.
Love it. Love it. Very nice.
I would say something that I've observed from the word cloud so far is I see that while a lot of the words and comments are very positive and strength-based in nature, I do see some more that are aligned with like some of the stereotypes of the topic of today's session. So I find that interesting too.
I see some people putting things in the chat, strong-minded.
I love your creativity and resilience. So those of you who didn't want to go into the word cloud of just participating using the chat, absolutely feel comfortable with that. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I noticed that as well, that it says you guys do know a little bit about working with Black girls, and you have a lot to say. So I'm sure that a lot of you could easily have been on this panel. So I can see that right now that you do know what you're doing in terms of working with Black girls. Very, very strength-based in your perspective. I love that. Fierce. I love that term. That is great.
Here's the one, Dr. Olatunji: kind, gentle, and powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, keep going with that. We're going to let that keep going. And we always follow up and send you an email after the webinar. And if there have been any great resources that you all have shared with us, we include that and send that out to everybody. And of course, this is being recorded. So the link to the recording on our YouTube channel will be made accessible to you. But yeah, we'll follow up, and yeah, we'll also capture this so you can have this as a graphic Feel free to use it, to turn it into a poster, do whatever you like. Share it in your trainings that you're offering with other folks. So feel free, as a token of our thanks for you coming and being with us today. So I'm going to just keep that activated. You guys can keep going, and I'll check back with it at the end, actually, to see if it's changed significantly in any way. So as we continue on, thank you for starting us off with that. And so now what I'd like to do is, let's see, we've got a question that we have a slide on adultification bias that we want to share with you. And I want to bring that up. And let's see. You see that slide? Okay.
No.
All right. Getting my technology together. You can see this one though, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So so here, Dr. West is going to talk a little bit about this particular slide.
There's some work that has been conducted that looked at adult perceptions of Black girls in particular. And the work was conducted by Epstein et al. And Blake and Epstein at Howard University. And what they found is compared to their white counterparts, Black girls were seen by adults as being in less need of protection, less need of support, comforting, and nurturing. They were also seen as being more independent, which falls in line with their view, the other views.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of their knowledge base, they were seen as knowing more about adult topics and about sex. And so in these ways, you can see that if your perception is that girls need less protection, support, guidance, nurturing, that they are more like an adult, more independent, even as young girls, Black girls as young as 5. So we're talking about not teenagers or children in high school per se, but this is starting at age 5, so that's kindergarten. That Black girls are seen as being less in need of adult intervention. This is known as adultification bias. And what this bias does is it places Black girls at increased risk for victimization. So how that plays itself out is that girls may be left alone. Adults may not be asking about what they're experiencing. They may feel as though they can handle themselves and that there's no need to keep up with what they're doing, where they're going, who they're being around, etc. And what that also may mean is that they're seen as more like adults and perhaps not in need of training, as more training and redirection, and maybe more punitive. And so what we find is across settings, whether we're talking about school, home, the clinical settings, as well as just the general community, what we find is that Black girls often receive harsher punishments. So they're more likely to be expelled, to receive corporal punishment in the school and in the home, et cetera, because the idea is that these girls are seen as knowing better and doing whatever they did willfully with the intention of either taking power from the adults, challenging adults, being difficult, rather than being in need of training, support, and redirection.
Thank you. So with that, let's open up our panel for discussion. So we'll start with one of the first questions. So what are some of the unique characteristics of Black girls? In other words, why are we focusing on Black girls? Why aren't we talking about just girls? Or why aren't we talking about just Black youth? So what are the unique characteristics of Black girls? And I'm gonna give Dr. White an opportunity to start us off, and then we all can jump in as panelists.
Thank you. First and foremost, I think we can't understate the fact that they're Black, right? And so that when you put Black against any identity, it changes the identity. And so for our Black girls, I'm so glad that Dr. West gave that introduction around adultification bias. There is this, I believe, burden that Black girls are born with that other folks that their counterparts of any race don't have to hold, right? And so they're not given the benefit of innocence. And there's already an assumed responsibility that they have even before being taught how to be responsible. And so I think that's important. We talk about presumed innocence. There's this presumed guilt already embedded because they have that intersectional identity, unfortunately, about being Black girls. So I'll start there.
I want to say too, oh, go ahead, Dr. West.
Yeah, were you going to say something, Ashley? Okay. All right. Well, I think that, that definitely makes sense in terms of the bias. So if we think about the ways, so the first issue is that sometimes Black girls are exhibiting the same behavior that other children do. And what I find a lot that I've seen in the classroom, that I've seen in clinical settings, even in terms of testing. So for example, a lot of times, especially white males or white boys in particular are very empowered. So I've done testing, I'm a psychologist, so I've done testing. And sometimes it's a good example with block design, I might give 9 blocks to a white boy, young white boy, and ask him to make a certain design. And if he can't do it, he'll say, unfair, you didn't give me enough blocks. I'm not going to do it unless you give me more. And it becomes this whole issue of him challenging the whole process because he's having difficulty. And then when I have either Black boys or Black or Hispanic or Latinx boys, and then girls across a race and ethnicity, they will often say, I can't do it, I'm stupid. They'll have that sort of idea. So they're less empowered. They're less likely to challenge the situation. But yet, boys, or particularly white boys, are seen as being independent, of being assertive. And then a lot of times when girls, particularly Black girls, who are seen as angry or aggressive in some way or intimidating, right? When they ask a question about something, it is presumed to be a challenge to the situation rather than just being inquisitive. And so, but then there are other situations in which Black girls can be pretty aggressive or sassy, if you want to say. But then it becomes an issue of the clinician, the teacher, the parent being able to tell the difference when Black girls are just asking questions like everyone else, or maybe they're just being assertive, versus maybe they are being aggressive and challenging authority. So you have to be able to discern what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, and to be able to tell the difference between your own misperception of the behavior, right? Am I treating this girl differently when in another child, I might think that is actually something indicative of independence as opposed to being sassiness. And then even when we do see true sassy behavior, then the question becomes what underlies that sassiness. And that's an important thing to be able to do. So you have to, number one, be able to tell what's going on. Is that your perception or is that reality? And then even with the reality, what are the factors explaining that? And what is that child, what is that girl, that Black girl telling you that she needs, or what is she reacting to in that environment?
And if I can just add before Ashley jumps in, the example that you gave, I just wanted to go back to it. I work primarily in my clinical practice with Black girls, with teenagers. And I find that they have this expectation of themselves to be able to figure things out. And so I find that Black girls are more likely to be critical thinkers than other folks that I've worked with. And so that example you gave with the blocks, in my experience, the Black girls that I worked with would feel this pressure to figure it out with what they have. And then if they were unsuccessful, will own that as something being attributed to them and not necessarily to what they have. And I think about given the context of Black girls, how so much more is often required of them, right? They have to be able to not just navigate their home environment, but navigate community, navigate relationships. And oftentimes I notice that young Black girls are the calm party, or are the negotiating party, even when it comes to adult situations, right? And so it's interesting that they have to hold all of that and walk this line very astutely between childhood and adulthood, not because they want to, but to your point, because they are expected to, right? And so when we think about that SAS, the Wordle, or it was a Wordle that was put up before, I noticed that people put speaking, talking, like when they were thinking about Sassy, how Black girls, just if they say anything, just if they speak up, they can't even just speak without it being seen as a challenge, without it being seen as a problem, and then what that does to them, right? So now I have to speak louder, or speak stronger, or speak harder, and now I'm being called sassy when it didn't start out that way, but you didn't hear me. So what are the tools I need to use to navigate the environment and be heard?
Exactly, Dr. White. I even think about, as you were talking about the speaking and the talking piece, I think about, I forget where this occurred, but there was a young Black girl in the school setting who was physically assaulted by a school resource officer for not responding, for being quiet. I think it was later revealed that she was grieving the loss of her mother. And, she was very quiet in class, and the teacher didn't like that she was responding. And she was pulled out of the class and, like I said, physically assaulted by the school resource officer. So even in the silence of Black girls, there's, issues and stereotypes that are assigned to them when we are minding our business. And I think about just that, the term Black girls, when I see that, I think about the intersection. So all that comes with being a Black individual in this country and in the world, and then all that comes with being a woman, and how, the sum or the total of those things is more than just the sum of those two parts. Like, it's an entirely different, greater experience, like sitting at that intersection, not to mention other marginalized identities they might hold when it comes to SES or sexual orientation or those sorts of things, religious identities, things like that. So just thinking of Black girls and that identity, it comes with a whole lot of stereotypes, a lot of pressure, just a lot of expectations, whether it be good or bad, and how that shapes how Black girls show up in the classroom, at home, in communities, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so, and we're getting lots of comments, a lot of amens, I see that, and that's awesome. So we're all on the same page, I love that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is important for us to talk about, because if you've seen any of our previous webinar, any of them, since we started, we've talked a lot about the correlation between racial cultural identity development and overall well-being for Black youth, and also their academic achievement. So we've got 30-something years of research that's being conducted, and every single time we take a look at it, and we're seeing this relationship between the two. So in addition to talking about how children are coping with racism, like how they're dealing with educational hegemony in the classroom, in the schooling experiences that they're having, let's talk about Black girls even before they start interacting with white people, right? So the idea is understanding, who are Black girls culturally? What do they bring to the table? We have got to really move forward with our understanding of culture in order for us to be successful with Black youth. So we need to really think about that. So one of the things that we know, and we've heard a little bit of that already from the panelists, about Black girls and their behaviors, their dispositions, how are they being inculcated as girls, as women, as human beings in this world, right? So one of the things is thinking about, what does femininity look like, right? For Black girls, is it the same as, and are the goals the same as they would be for white girls, right? So are parents of Black girls telling their daughters the same things to do and how to behave? Are they not? So one is thinking about this issue of Black families and how we have these flexible roles in our families of people taking on different roles within the family. And oftentimes, as we've heard, Black girls are taking on roles where they're caretakers for other children in the family. But in doing so, it doesn't mean that they have the same adult authority, that they have become adults. So Black families are able to manage these flexible roles without changing people's identity, right? And a lot of times that gets misinterpreted from outsiders who see these girls as adults when they're not, but they know how to step in and take on these roles at the same time, not changing who they are inside. So their needs don't change, right? But they often are asked to step in and take on these roles. Another is talking about what does it mean to become a Black woman, right? So we've heard also this issue about voice and about resistance, about how do we speak our truth? And is that promoted or is that not promoted, right? So is a demure female what Black parents are asking their daughters to become? I don't think so, right? So we look for different characteristics of a well-behaved, a well-trained, right, girl, adolescent. We are looking for different behaviors. So when educators are talking about scaffolding and building that link between school and home, if you don't understand what the values are in the home, it becomes very difficult for you to help a child to be all they can be in the classroom setting. So it's important to be able to do that, to understand what are the cultural characteristics of Black girls and how do we support them in their growth and development so that they grow up and become the best of what it means to be a Black woman within the context of African culture. So I would add that to the discussion. We have another question. And we're going to get to some of those things that you guys are talking about in the chat. I see those. How are some of the perceptions of Black girls regarding these attitudes, as we saw on the Wordle, and behaviors as being sassy? How common are these perceptions? Who is perceiving Black girls these ways? And what contributes to those people's perceptions of Black girls? And are they valid or are they misconceptions? So I'm going to ask Ashley, actually, would you start off the panel discussion?
Absolutely. So my first thought was that sometimes the call is coming from inside the house. I think that it's up to us as Black folks within Black families to really assess how we're viewing our children and specifically our Black girls. I think someone mentioned in the chat that Black girls are born adults and other races are allowed to be children, and especially firstborn Black girls are expected to become mothers, or kind of, like what Dr. West was talking about, the adultification piece. I'm expected to kind of step into those roles from an early age. And I think that, again, that starts at home, but also, we have this pressure coming from schools, and as well, there's so much data to support this idea or this notion that, the stereotypes against Black girls are harming them in school, such that, they're expected to perform more maturely at a different rate than, their peers. So I think that's my first thought, is that when we think about where these attitudes and things come from, I'm very accountable in that way. I think about how we, may be engaging in those things in our own homes.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Thinking about that, I'll use myself as an example. When I was in kindergarten, I had a nephew he's about 8 months younger than I am, because my oldest brother is 19 years older than I am. So we were about the same age. And the way our birthdays fell, we were both in kindergarten at the same time. And I lived a little closer to the school that we attended. He lived a little bit further, say about 2 or 3 blocks further away from the school. And he was supposed to walk up the hill to my house, and then we walked to school together, but he would never make it. Well, often he didn't make it. So my job was to walk away from school to go get him, wake him up, make sure he was dressed and whatever else he needed, and then walk past my house to the school. So needless to say, we were often late. And I caught a lot of flack for that because I'm older by 8 months, around 5, right? Trying to make sure that I got to school, and this other person who's just barely under me, I have to have power. I have to get you up, get you out, get the bed. I have to make this person who's my age. Oftentimes he'd be in his pajamas. So we got to start from scratch, right? And it was still my responsibility. I'm the older one. I need to make sure he can get it together. And it was like, oh my God, this is what I have to do because all the adults were at work. And so if you have that sort of responsibility, and it was not negotiable, I had to get us to school on time. Then it becomes, I have to do that at 5. Well, part of the way I've been groomed was being groomed to be this responsible 5-year-old who could do that and have a key. I had a key to get into his place, my place. I'm handling all of this. And I get to school, and I remember my teachers, especially those who were not African-American or attuned to African-American culture, would say, little girls don't talk like that. Little girls don't do that. You don't sit like a girl. You don't talk as quiet as a girl. Girls should say, and she was just constantly grooming me about how I express myself and what I should do to be more like a little lady. Oh, she would always say, little ladies don't, little ladies this, that. And it became, no, little ladies in my community are groomed to function and carry themselves a certain way because I am responsible for a lot. I have to, in a neighborhood where I have to give off attitude to keep us safe. So if I act like a little lady from your perspective, I'm going to be victimized in these situations. I'm not going to be able to get this child out of school, out of the bed. I have to be able to be powerful in my situation and still be a lady, but a lady as defined by whom. And when we have Eurocentric perceptions of what it is to be feminine and what little ladies look like and what you're grooming me to be, we're not groomed as African-American girls to keep going back to adults and asking for help, to keep complaining about something. It becomes answer it, handle it yourself. I expect you to be able to handle that. Don't tell me every day about something that's going on. I don't want to keep hearing about the same issue at school. You need to solve that problem. And in some ways that empowers us, right? But other ways, sometimes if it's something much more difficult for us to handle, we are open to being victimized because we have no idea how to handle it, and we're taught not to go and ask for help. And so that's the challenge. On one hand, it does make you super independent. I figured out how to get us to school on time. However, there were some situations that I never told any adult about. That I really needed help with. I did need my parents to come to school and get some people put in their place and understood about the fact that I was protected and that certain types of behaviors would not be tolerated. And so it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it has some excellent characteristics in terms of promoting independence and confidence. But on the other hand, in terms of how we're perceived, especially by people outside of our culture, it causes problems because how do I act like a little girl, a little lady at school for my teacher and make her happy, but then leave that at the school so I can make it home, right? Without being bullied or attacked in some way that I had to give off enough attitude to protect me and my younger, my nephew. So it does create a situation.
I wanted to add, so your comment made me think about, if you guys remember the movie Annie with the little Black girl, Quincy Wallace. Mm-hmm. She was doing an interview shortly after the release of the movie, and there was a white male interviewer, and he's just, getting to know her, helping the audience to get to know her. And he asked her, what did you like to do when you were a little girl? And her, she's 11, 12 years old at the time. She says, what do you mean? I'm still a little girl. And he's just so puzzled by that. Like, he viewed her as a full-grown woman, even though this is a little girl who played Annie in a movie, and this is what the interview is about. And so, like what Dr. West was saying, it's a perception that our families create and the expectations that they give to us, and then it's taken on by the outside schools and communities that is put onto Black girls, even though the needs are still there that aren't being met. So I just wanted to share that because I think about that often, and how, I guess, emotionally traumatizing that could be for her to be like perceived by this interviewer on a very public platform as this grown woman who is very much a little girl playing a very little girl type role. So thank you for that, Dr. West. Dr. White, were you going to chime in?
I was, thank you. And so I actually think it's the reverse. And so two things I'll say, because I know we've been on this question, but two things I will say. I have to, in my mind, I have to think from a contextual factor. So I think for me, it happened in reverse. I don't think it started with the Black family, right? I think it's the Black family's response to systems. And so something that I quote Dr. West in saying, she said this in conversation to me, but I quote her in saying this all the time. Two things: that we swim in a sea of white people's pathology to the point that we don't even have our own thoughts, right? And so the way that we are acting is not, I don't believe it's our natural behavior all the time. I think it's our natural response to what's happening around us, right? And so an abnormal response to an abnormal situation is a normal response. And so the problem is, talking about that two-edged sword, is that then if I could say this, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And so no matter how I engage with you, if I don't fit in these little boxes for you, which are already pathologized, right, which are already problematic, but at least if I'm in those boxes, you feel like you know how to deal with me. Once I step out of those boxes and assert myself, or I'm an individual, or live what's natural to my context, I really become a problem, because now you're like, abort, what happened? You're malfunctioning against what this box that I have created for you. Mm-hmm. When I did my dissertation, I did it on African-American women. I remember very specifically, and this was a young woman in undergraduate college who said this to me. She talked about how she walks through her community and, the stereotype of the angry Black woman, right? And she said something that to me was so profound. She said, "No, I'm not angry, I'm mad." And someone else hearing that would have heard like, what's the difference? But for me, I knew exactly what she was saying, that it's, I have a right to be mad, and that not identify me as a person, and that not be who I am, fully characterize my experience. And so, going back to what you said, Dr. Constance West, because to Dr. West-Olatunji, but to Dr. Constance West, right? There is this situation that happens where Black girls are socialized to be responsible for everybody. Black men, Black women, Black girls, Black boys, we're socialized to be responsible for everybody. And a part of that is we want to foster community in our girls. Like, listen, you got to look out for each other. But the problem is, we're only telling our Black girls to do that. We're not telling everybody else they need to be responsible for her as well. And so then we become complicit in socializing our Black girls. We tell our Black girls, don't sit on his lap, right? Because it's your responsibility as a Black girl to control that Black man. Don't hug too many people, don't do this. And so she's internalizing these messages, and then she does what you do, right, Dr. Constance West? She forms this exterior of, let me have this attitude to keep people away, because at least if I have this wall up, it's a protective mechanism, right? But the reason she has to do that is because nobody else is being told to protect her, right? So not only does she have to protect him, her cousin, family, she's even responsible for protecting herself, right? And so, we have to think about that nuance. I don't think it started with the Black family. I think it started with this racist context that created an environment for us to respond. And when you're in an abnormal situation, you have abnormal responses.
Absolutely. So I agree with that. So if the idea is that, okay, how do I prepare my little Black girl to be in this world in which she is seen as less important, less valued as a female and as a person who is Black? So how I do that is I can't have her coming to me crying about various things. I need her to stand up. And if I have to leave you to work all day, I need you to be able to handle yourself during the day. If I have to leave at 7 or 6 and you have to be to school at 8 something, I have to get you together. If you have to have a key to my house, then you need to be able to handle that key. You need to be clear, but no one can ask you for your key. You do not give your key to anyone at school. It ends up being, yes, I'm in this situation, given where we are and given what we encounter. That means I need to empower you, and you understand that even when I'm not there, you speak with my authority, right? You tell every adult, anybody who does X, Y, and Z to you, you can get them off of you, and I will back you up, right? Because I'm not there to do it, right? Unfortunately, what that means is if I'm unsuccessful, right, trying to navigate in this world full of racism and sexism, where do I go as a Black girl? So what do I do? If I come back to you, you're already busy, you already have a lot going on. I feel guilty, right? So it means I've not spared you from difficulty, stress, extra burden. But we have to create these safe spaces so that Black girls can feel like, yes, I ran into a problem today and I tried the things you taught me, but it didn't work. And I need to be able to tell you that without feeling as though I'm creating an issue or that I failed this whole idea of looking out for everybody, right? That somebody needs to look out for me. And some of that so-called sassy behavior is saying something has gone wrong in this system. This system is either not hearing me, not seeing me, not protecting me, not nurturing me, not giving me information and tools that I need. So because when you do that, when you provide that, what's missing, then a lot of that so-called attitude, so-called sassiness disappears because it's not needed because the adults are doing what they're supposed to do. Therefore, that little girl does not have to do it for herself.
Yes. Yeah. So what I was going to say, and thank you. It's nice to know you're listening to me, Ebony. Okay. So what I was thinking is something I often used to say to my clients when I was in private practice about things that they're doing, tools that they're using to survive. So I saw folks that worked, it resonated for them when we were talking about survival, that a lot of times Black girls' behaviors are about survival, about how do they make it? How do they navigate in this world that is often hostile toward them? I love how you said, damned if they do, damned if they don't. In other words, the choices aren't good because the way the perceptions, which was the question, right, about perceptions, right, are very negative, right? The perceptions are not helpful to them. So I often would say to my clients who have been doing the same thing and getting very negative results, not getting outcomes that they want. And I would say, you know, here in New Orleans, we have a lot of environmental challenges, right? So we could have flooding at any time, we have a hurricane and so on. So I would give that example that people could relate to. And I'd say, okay, so, all right, we think about it, a hurricane came and we're stuck in our houses and stuff like that. And we are just eating beans and rice. And we love red beans and rice here, right? Beans and rice, beans and rice, beans and rice. And everybody looks at you and they're like, oh, you're so resilient. Oh my goodness, the way in which you were being creative about making the beans and rice, you are amazing, right? But then several weeks go by and things have opened up. They can bring fruits and vegetables in, and we can now have a very varied kind of diet. We could be eating other things. I come to your house 2 weeks later and you're still eating beans and rice. So now I went from looking at you as though you're amazingly resilient to what are you doing, right? Wondering why are you still making those choices when there are other choices for you? So when we take a look at the ways in which we're working with our Black girls, yes, when we have been just surviving, we have left our daughters to fend for themselves. And they have been all the things we put on the wordle. They have been resilient. They have been courageous. They have been valiant, right? They've been resourceful. They've been all of those things. But I put in the chat, hold up, let's talk about our values as a people. Balance, order, reciprocity. Where's the reciprocity for our girls? If the girls are out there doing that, that only works in our culture, in our society, when the adults are doing what they're supposed to do. When they get the support that they need, it works. Then they come out being amazing, strong, resilient women. But if not, they're eating beans and rice when there are fruits and vegetables to be added to the diet. So something that was considered to be helpful is now hindering, right? So we have to take a look at that. I agree with you, Dr. White, about this issue of, yes, it is a response to an oppressive environment, but it is behaviors that are part of our culture, right? That have morphed into something else that isn't working for our girls. And it is, as Dr. West said, Dr. Constance West, right, is that it is because we as adults are not doing what we're supposed to do. We as adults who are programmed people, we as adults who are educators, we as adults, right, who are parents, who are caretakers, we as adults who are leaders in athletic programs, in civic programs, anybody who is working with Black children need to understand Black girls and to know that we need to give them the support that they need in order to do that. That is the reciprocity, right? Exactly. That is the reciprocity. That is what we need to do, which is why we work with educators and parents to help parents so that that's going on and be able to work with mental health people. It's time for a poll. All right, let's see. Let me pull this poll up. Yes, and I'm launching it. All right. And for those of you who may have difficulty for whatever reason, maybe it's a device that you're on, or maybe you don't see it. Everybody see the poll, right? You can just click on that. If for whatever reason you're having difficulty clicking on the poll, feel free to put your responses in the chat. All right. So what is the top schooling experience that contributes to Black girls' engagement and academic performance? And we gave you the choices: negative peer influences, disproportionate suspensions and expulsions, disparity in court referrals into the juvenile justice system, insufficient engagement between parent and educators, lack of ability or effort. So let's see what you guys have to say about that. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at your comments in the chat and I'm looking at this poll, and about half of you, a little over half, have participated. So we're gonna keep it up and see what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for your comments. You know, I grew up in a Baptist church, so it's like I love hearing something from the congregation about what it is that you're thinking and feeling about what it is that we're saying, right? So yeah, yeah, let us focus on this, Dr. Rashan. Yes, absolutely, about the reciprocity of what are we doing for our Black girls? Why is that not a priority? A couple of months ago, we had a webinar talking about suicide, suicidal behavior, suicide completions, suicidal ideation among Black youth. And one of the things we were appalled by is looking at the number of suicide behaviors among Black girls being 3 times that of their peers. So that tells us we are not doing our job. We are not providing that balance to their courage, right? To their assertiveness, to their self-care that they're doing even, right? We are not providing that balance so that they can do that. I remember, so Dr. West has shared about her childhood experiences. I'll talk about it. So I grew up with our 3 older brothers. So I grew up with them as part of that. And yeah, I was sassy, right? Absolutely. But I knew I had 3 big boys, right? Standing behind me. I could say whatever I wanted because I knew they were standing right behind me. And so I wasn't worried. I was not worried, right? So I could speak truth and feel confident because I was cared for. I knew I wasn't standing out there by myself, right? And so that's important for us to understand. So I'm going to, let's see, we have people, we got about 60% of the folks who use the poll. And we also have folks who are talking in the chat. Let's see, people are still adding on to the poll, that's good. I can tell you right now that the biggest points are still the insufficient engagement between parents and educators and the disproportionate suspensions and expulsions. And we're gonna go right into that. We have a slide to show you. So I'm gonna stop the poll now so that you can see your results. I know people are still adding to it, but I'm gonna stop it because I want you to see it. Okay, so can you see the poll results? Okay, great. So yeah, so definitely, and I saw in the chat, people are also saying the parent-educator connection is really important and has a great influence, both positive and negative, on how Black girls are behaving. Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah, UK racism. Angela, we're going to have you to get on a panel. We need you to talk about it because I've had an opportunity to talk to educators and mental health professionals in the UK. And yes, I would love to bring that perspective and also some of your solutions over here so that we can have that. Absolutely. We're all about that. All about that. Awesome.
Dr. West-Olatunji. I just have to say this. Joy's comment about the lack of understanding about Black genius really resonates with me, and hopefully with other people. I'm seeing Jacqueline giving me a head nod. Yeah, it's like, okay, sometimes that ability to quickly understand a situation, to have a comeback, even if it's not something you want to hear at that point, it may not be the right way in which it's being expressed, but oftentimes that is an indication of a child being bright and being able to understand adult situations. They may have to learn when to speak and when not to speak, and when they should be more empowered, but not missing that. So sometimes I've seen that in general with children of color, but especially with Black girls, is that the referral for testing is about behavior. Being defiant, or being behavior that's perceived as being defiant. And it turns out they're actually gifted. And getting back with the parents, sometimes some parents are great, happy, and other parents are giving me pushback. They're like, you're telling me this child is gifted? Absolutely gifted. And the same thing with the school. So sometimes I'm the only advocate for the child in the school, because I'm saying, actually, the child that you sent to me because of these problematic behaviors are actually indicative of giftedness, and has she been considered for the gifted program? And it becomes that sort of an issue. And so sometimes people are missing our brilliance, and sometimes it's being missed in the home, sometimes it's being missed in clinical settings, and it's being missed in educational settings when it's so obvious. I remember having a client who's an adult who was clearly brilliant. And she, from her description, she's often been pointed out as someone who's weird, odd, asked too many questions, on and on, but never gifted. And it's like, how did they miss your brilliance? That is very sad that, you're in your 30s and I'm the first person to tell you how brilliant you are, but you're brilliant. And that's a different way to interpret your behavior, even for yourself. The reason why you couldn't hold your peace, why you couldn't ask questions, why you couldn't just go with, because I told you so. You needed to understand it. Not that you were challenging it, you just wanted to understand so you could process it, was missed all along. And I think that one of the reasons why we do this work is so that all of us can be able to more accurately assess the children that we are dealing with as parents, educators, clinicians, people in the community in general, and definitely don't miss Black brilliance, Black genius, and Black girls. They're underutilized resource for our community.
Black genius. I'm loving it. Loving it, loving it, loving it, loving it. All right, so we have another slide for you to take a look at. So one of the options for that poll was talking about the disproportionate disciplinary practices with Black girls. So right now, what we know from the literature is that Black girls are the fastest growing group in the school to prison pipeline. And so this is what, it's like, we need to see this as an urgent matter. The house is on fire when we come to thinking about Black girls and being able to do that. So Black schoolgirls experience school suspensions at a rate that is, do you see that number? Y'all reading that? 7 times that of their peers? Is that not an urgent matter? School officials have been shown to impose harsher punishments on Black girls, spurring the fastest increase in arrests and incarceration. Now look at the date of that research. That is very, very current information. when I say the house is on fire, this is the information that you need to be able to take to your program, your agency, to say, this needs to be a priority. Black girls' acts of resilience, defiance, and resistance are often interpreted as behavior problems, conduct disorders, and hyper-developmental behaviors requiring harsh physical and adult interventions, right? So this takes us to more discussion. So Dr. White, right? Based on your research, your clinical practice, and your experience, what are some of the factors that contribute to the rising rates of, for instance, suicidal behaviors, attempts, and completions among Black girls in particular?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. It goes back to something that we were talking about earlier. We're not listening to our Black girls. We are not listening. And I wish I had brought in this article, but a couple of years ago, and I did research on this very thing, I found an article that showed that 92% of Black girls who attempted suicide had told someone that they wanted to end their lives, and they weren't believed. And they weren't believed. And so it's a problem that we don't see our girls as needing protection, as needing support, as needing help, right? Our Black girls aren't given the benefit of the doubt. And so when there's a change in behavior, we know, for those of, as clinicians, one of the first signs we notice when someone is depressed or is suicidal is that there's a drastic change in behavior, right? But when our Black girls' behavior change, we see it as problematic or needing to be punished. And so instead of saying this person needs support, they need some care, let's figure out how to help, right? We say, okay, we need to suspend them, right? We need to punish them, all of those things. And so it compounds the issue, because now not only did you not hear them when they were struggling, now you're saying that even when you're hurting, you deserve to be punished. Right. And so going back to that, that not being presumed innocent or fragile is problematic. Additionally, we know that historically in our system, the system of care has not always been kind to Black folks. And so there still exists this mistrust in our community in regards to seeking help for our girls. So I also think that, going back to those behaviors you were mentioning, Dr. West-Olatunji, I also think that we have to do better. And I know I might upset some folks today. We have to do better with not always saying, let's pray the devil away, right? Let's pray about this as a family and we can stop there, right? We have to do better with really linking in the supports that'll be helpful for our young girls. And then finally, and I don't know how much research has been done on this, but with technology, it's really made the external more visible and feel more internal, if that makes sense, if I'm making sense here. And so before we knew what beauty standards were and things of that nature, but what was beauty in our communities was elevated more. But now with so much access to the open, to the world, and this shift that, has been made in many in our society, there's more pressure for girls to behave in certain ways. And we already know that adultification bias, right? They're seen as older. And so there are expectations that people have of them that sometimes they give into, sometimes they don't, that are traumatic for them. And then finally, I'll say we have to get rid of this, what happens in the house stays in the house. Unfortunately, a lot of my clients that I've worked with, and even adult Black women that I worked with, have been molested, assaulted, raped, and have not disclosed it because they're embarrassed, because they feel guilt, ashamed, because they feel responsible, all of the things, or because they told someone and the family chose to protect the male and not the girl. And so holding that in and then having to see your victimizer on a regular basis, that also leads to depression and then, suicidality as well.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So that issue of having that support. So again, this idea of having had those places in our society where you did go and seek, and bring your grievances to seek some kind of restorative justice. Those things have changed or are absent in our communities. And so again, we lack that balance that's needed in order for these things to happen, and it's causing problems. I'm going to ask Ashley to put a question in the chat as we move forward, because we want to open up for Q&A. So we want to, because you're already active, you're already asking questions. So we want to be able to do that. And you can ask questions in the Q&A section. So if there's some particular issue that you're dealing with at your particular agency or in your home, for example, please put that in the Q&A. You can ask private questions, you can ask anonymous questions, or you can just ask a question that everybody can see and we'll answer them. We'll either answer them live orally, or we will type a response to you. And when we get to that, we'll allow Jacqueline to manage the Q&A and so on. But we've got this question in here for you. We want to know, what have you been doing? So I've seen where you all are coming from, what agencies and organizations you're representing. You have Black girls in your programs, so you must be doing and creating interventions and intervention programs for them. So please share with your colleagues, what kinds of things are you doing with the girls in your program? Yeah, so Ashley, if you wanted to manage some of the responses that are coming in.
Absolutely. So I see that some of you all are sharing quite a bit. Feel free to take your time with that. I'll read some of them as they start coming in. We have Joy shared that she meets beautiful brown and Black girls where they're at, listening more to them, and also asking what they need. That's really important, so that we're not assuming. Kizzy says motivational interviewing them about their beauty and how to be unapologetically Black and loving the skin that they're in. Also absolutely important. Thank you for sharing some of those things. So what are some other things that you all are doing to help improve outcomes for our Black girls? So Angie says, allowing them to have a voice, whether it's something we want to hear or not. They need to know that their voice matters. Yes, I love that, Angie. Dion says, showing up in schools as authentic, genuine, and insisting that schools give me room to create affinity spaces. That is so important. I think that helps to build the rapport with them, because we know that it doesn't come automatically. Just because we look alike doesn't mean that they're automatically gonna open up to us and confide in us and allow us to be there for them. We have to create those spaces. Xavier says, I'm a dance movement therapist, currently working with Doorways in Virginia. Unfortunately, we're still virtual, but often use strengths-based approaches, including incorporating parts of their culture, interests, and other intersectionalities through creative movement with no judgment. Yes, I love that. And it sounds really aligned with what we do in the CREST program. Kizzy also says, advocating for their rights and treatment needs when I attend meetings and court hearings. So important. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Angela says, I'm a librarian in a high school, about to start a Black history group with students. I bring in Black guest speakers, stock the latest books, and encourage them to be someone they can become and talk to when teachers are a problem. Angela listens to them and tries to help them navigate this racist system. So important. So important. Someone from Education Evolving says, very similar to what's been shared, working intentionally on healing the little girl that didn't have access to the kind of support and awareness we're talking about right now. I think definitely being the change that we want to see, or making the experiences better than what we might have experienced, in our childhood and growing up. Definitely so important. Deborah says this will be maybe the last one that we share, but feel free to continue sharing them into the chat so that others can read them. But Deborah says a safe space to talk about medical issues or concerns after working on building a trustful relationship. Absolutely. So thank you all for sharing those things. Hopefully, what you shared might help someone else to, see how they might be able to apply that in their settings. And like I said, feel free to continue sharing those in the chat so that others may read.
So right before we go right into just straight, Q&A, we have this last slide for you. 3 evidence-based approaches for Black girls. One is empowerment-based programming, and empowerment-based programming acknowledges the need for resistance in an oppressive environment, as we've already talked about, but it provides you with research. So they were able to engage in research comparing how children did in the empowerment-based program versus other kinds of programming, and found that these girls experienced less depression and were much more engaged in school and so on. The second is the cultural enhancement projects that deal with racial cultural identity development. So once again, we're here to tell you, if you are not including racial cultural identity development as part of any program, educational program, social supports program, whatever it is you're doing, if you're not including that, you are missing out. So definitely you want to take a look at some of these studies where they can demonstrate that young girls learning about their culture, their value system, and feeling good about themselves is really important. And knowing their history is important. Finally, family and peer supports, taking a look at that reciprocity that we've been talking about today, of having that strong support amongst adults. And this one also peer, also allow, counterbalance the assertiveness and those what are viewed as sassiness in Black girls. So it's important for us to be able to go to our agencies, to our organizations, our schools and institutions and families to be able to say, this is what we're going to do because it's based on evidence-based research. So now, yes, let's find out. Jacqueline, let's bring you in. And if you could manage our questions.
Absolutely. Ashley has, thank you. This was a very engaging conversation. It was very needed. I actually see the Sassy Girl Part 2 coming in and adding some more information to it, actually. So if you have any questions, you put it in the Q&A, and then I can ask those questions to our panelists. Any questions? I don't see any. You can either put them in the chat or the Q&A section. Don't see any right now. Okay. Well, how about I come up with a question I have, and then if you have questions, please come in. I'll come up with the questions. I had wrote some down, a few down for myself. And so we were talking about what kind of things, this is for all the panelists, what kind of things can we do? And we probably talked a little bit about that to help our youth navigate maybe microaggressive behaviors and different things like that. How can we help them grow and to manage the microaggressive behavior, or the idea that they are the angry, sassy Black girl? How can we manage that? What kind of things can we do to teach them? Just some quick things that we can actually teach our youth, our girls.
Dr. White, would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, I'm hearing your question, but there's this story that I wanted to share, and it's on my mind too.
Please share it.
I'm going to share it and then segue into answering your question. See, I'm singularly focused. No, so I was just thinking more about the last question that Dr. O asked, and I was like, I remember I had a past client, teenage girl who, she was an honor student, and then she got a report card where she had a couple of C's on her report card, and she came and to my session, and she was saying, my mom was so mad at me. I'm just gonna mute. She yelled at me, and she told me she expected better of me, and she started crying. And the last thing she said before I responded to her was, she said she didn't even ask me what was wrong. Mm. And so that is what was sitting on my, my chest, that story came to mind, and it makes me emotional even thinking about it. Like, wow, all this pressure that our Black girls have to contend with, that, you know, in our preparing of them, how we mess up and make mistakes. And we're like, you know, you're excellent, you're better than that, you're an honor student. You know, I'm taking this from you because you can't, since you can't, you know, get the good grades. And meanwhile, the girl's hurting. And she's like, you know, she didn't even ask me what's wrong. And so giving our girls the benefit of support, the benefit of fragility too, right? We think that, you know, when we talk about that first question, you know, white girls and white women get to be fragile and feminine and need help, right? But guess what? We need that too. We need care as well. And so approaching our young girls with gentleness and approaching them with love is so important. And so to answer your question around microaggressions, for me, I teach the teens that I work with that there's power in numbers, because we have to be careful. There are real consequences they have to deal with, unfortunately, when they're standing up for themselves, right? And so for me as a counselor, central to my identity is advocacy. So I know I'm going to advocate for them. But, you know, the beginning of sessions, and this is from a clinician standpoint, in the beginning of my sessions, I already know, like, who's your support system? Who do you go to? And I don't just mean parents and guardians, like, who do you go to, right? And so when things are coming up, I'm like, you know, you named these people before, can we get them involved somehow? Or how about we talk to your teacher? You know, can we have a meeting with the teacher? Or do you want to bring your parents in and we write a letter together to the super, you know, what can we do? Do you want to form a group? And I've had some really amazing girls who have started school groups, like activities, formed them with the principal and everything, just for supports for themselves. I had teens who made a video to show to school board meetings, you know, and so just helping them stretch their advocacy balls and say, listen, you don't have to be quiet, but also preparing them and talking through with them. Okay, if you're not quiet, what do you need to be successful in this advocacy? How can I support you through it and not just bring you to it like, okay, now go off and you're by yourself, but how can I support you through this process? Absolutely.
I love that answer. That's amazing. It goes back to that Black genius too. If it's not there, let's recreate it. Let's create it for ourselves. I love that. Thank you, Dr. White. Here's another question. Dr. White, how did you feel as a Black girl growing up, and what was some of your obstacles?
So I was a latchkey kid, my sister and I. So you mentioned that you better know how to handle this key. Absolutely. I remember that, Dr. West. And so it is so interesting because when I look back on my childhood, when I was in it, I didn't realize all the obstacles that were there. I didn't, right? So I grew up, you know, poor, right? Under resource, grew up in the projects, but, you know, my friends were there, I had family there. So I didn't even realize that this meant that you were poor, right? And so I had a lot of supports. I had a community that really guided me through. But something that was an obstacle for me, I know someone put in the chat, you know, asking the girls what they need. Sometimes our girls don't know what they need, or that they're being microaggressed. And this is a very common story that happened to me, my guidance counselor, when I was in 10th grade, and I was talking about colleges. She told me that I should consider cosmetology school because kids from my school didn't do well in college. Now, I didn't think she was being malicious. I still don't think she was being malicious. I think that she felt like she was setting me up for success and not failure. And so I went home and I said, oh, Mom, you know, I'm thinking about cosmetology schools. And she was like, you don't even like doing your own hair. Why would you be thinking about cosmetology? So I said, well, my guidance counselor said, you know, A, B, C. And I could see the fury in my mother, right? And my mom was unpartnered, right? And so she took off of work, which means a lot, you know, to like, you know, you need those days. She took off of work and came to school with me. And she lit into that guidance counselor. And it wasn't until, you know, I saw how upset my mom was that I realized, oh, this was wrong. Something happened. And I think about how many Black girls are experiencing this and don't even know that this is happening. And they may not have someone who can take off of work and come and be their advocate. And that's why we have to have our educators, our school counselors, our principals prepared to support this population effectively and in culturally competent ways.
Excellent. That's a great answer for that. And thank you for sharing that personal experience. I believe that you're 100% right. I know that you're right about that. Having that your mom was able to do that. I work with children also in my practice, and some of the kids, oh, I'm just gonna go to trade school. They don't even have a clue that they can be a doctor, a lawyer, or anything else you want to be, because they've been put into that box, like you said, by a school counselor and maybe even a parent, not knowing to actually push them forward.
Right.
So
And there's
thank you
nothing
so
wrong with going to cosmetology school. That's a
right,
very
right,
lucrative career. It's just
right.
that it wasn't for me.
Right, right, right. And don't put me in that. And I like what your mom said. You don't even like hair. So why would you do that? It's nothing wrong with if that's what something you want to do, but don't put me in something just because you think that would be the only thing I can do. So absolutely. Thank you for that, Dr. White. That was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. I don't see any more questions in our
There's
chat.
one question in the Q&A
Oh,
feature.
oh yeah, there is. Thank you, Ashley. From Xavier Hawkins. How would you recommend dispelling the sassy Black girl myth with Black girls who come from immigrant families where there is still a stigma of mental health?
Well, I always question when we talk about mental health stigma, and we're talking about Black people. And I, given the fact that I've created a lot of mental health programs, counseling centers in all kinds of communities, in faith-based communities connected to those large mega churches, in public housing, and so on, where they said nobody would go. Black people, they don't like, mental health. They don't like counseling. And I was like, maybe they don't like your counseling, but it's like, I'm just saying, it's like everywhere I've been where we've created it, they have loved it. I love what Dr. Constance West talks about in terms of her clients saying, oh no, I don't want a psychologist, I want you, right? So what they're saying is what has been delivered to them is not recognizable to them, and it's not helpful. And so we don't need to say what it is. When I went into all those communities, I didn't come in with a name tag and everything. And I'm here to do therapy. I'm here, I didn't do any of that. I just came in and respected people, listened to people of what it is that they needed. And I just started helping, healing, and so on. Then they started asking for me. Where's that lady? We want her. Then they're like, no, we don't want you. We want that lady right there and the other students that came with her. We want that, whatever it is. And what that is culturally recognizable interventions with them. So we have 3 minutes left. I have a video that I want to show you, and it's only 15 seconds. So you can make it to the end. And it is when I was working in public housing, developing, doing the needs assessment for 2 years, and then finally developed this counseling center in this public housing area. And I told the students that we're about to do a girls group, all Black girls in the group, all adolescent Black girls. My students, I was teaching at Xavier at the time, all Black students who were going in and delivering this girls group. And they showed me what they wanted to do, all the interventions they were going to do. And then they showed me this icebreaker that they were going to do. And it was cute. It's the shield, that some of you in mental health might remember that activity. But I always say to my students, wait, let me get this right. I'm Black, you're Black, the clients are Black. Where did this come from? So this idea that we need to hard reset, we need to decolonize our minds about the work that we're doing. So when I asked them, when you were a young adolescent and a new girl came around in your neighborhood and y'all wanted to get to know her, what did you do? And this video is this is a true video. This is what my student did.
Introduce yourself right on. Introduce yourself right on. My name, yeah, it's Crystal, yeah. And my sign, yeah, is Leo, yeah. And I say, yeah, be yourself.
Exactly. So I was like, that's the problem. We bring that other thing to the kids and they don't identify with it. They don't identify, the parents don't identify. And so when you ask them about therapy, they're thinking of that and they're like, we don't go to that. We're not interested in that. So you have to bring something that's recognizable. You have to remember, cultures were dealing with healing in an emotional and psychological context well before Freud showed up in the 1800s. So you can't tell me that people don't have a context for healing, for mental health and healing. Okay, so that's my response to that. So if the folks are not responsive to whatever it is you're offering, offer them something else that's recognizable to them. But let us not buy into the stereotype that Black people are not interested in, and we don't have an affinity for mental health and healing. We do. Oh, wow. Yes, yes. Oh, Dion, applying African sacred science principles rooted in our experiences is key. Ashe, 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 Tutu. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ebony White, for joining us today. You were essential. We love it. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to all of you for showing up. And yes, a reminder, we always do a follow-up email to you, to all the attendees. And we send you this follow-up, all the resources and things like that. All those things, we pull that together and we send you an email, and then the link to the video that will be up in YouTube. So thank you so much. Follow us on social media. We want you to be a part of that. We share a lot. And if you're available, we'll see you next month. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. We really appreciate you. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Wonderful. Excellent. You're all wonderful people. Thank you. Dr. White, you have a fan club.
That's my cousin. I told you I was a favorite cousin.
That's what that meant. I like how that works. Okay.
Oh, how lovely.
Have a great week. We'll see you all next month.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
We made it excellence. I like that.
Yes.
Excellent.
Oh my goodness. What a wonderful group of people. All right. Well, I think we will log off now and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, Dr. White. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
And save me some beans and rice, Dr. W.
Oh, you know it. Bye-bye.